Our relationship can be impacted negatively if one of us is doing too much of the talking and the other one not doing enough sharing.
So if we have too many words, we may feel that we don't get decision making from the spouse. They don't feel safe. They can't keep up with us verbally, and they may feel intimidated verbally because, hey, we're better at the verbal joust than they are.
We don't want a marriage that feels one sided, where it mainly takes on the personality and expression of only one. The reason we got married in the first place was where we could share life together.
And so the more verbal spouse needs to really work at creating a welcoming environment for the less verbal spouse. And the less verbal spouse needs to be communicative about the problems they're seeing that makes them not feel comfortable.
Of course, we've got to be open to making these changes. That means opening up if you're not talking enough, and it means reining it in some if you're talking a lot.
So let's talk about when somebody is very emotional or very intense. In a marriage, if we're really emotional, and this can be very intense, especially to whoever's the internal processor. It may be the man or it may be the woman. But when we are the external processor, we can accidentally share too much emotion and we won't get the changes that we're looking for.
Sometimes we need to learn how to connect with a more emotional expression. And so many times you find that with men, we need to learn how to connect with our wives on an emotional level so that they can feel satisfied that we're making that connection.
Because I think the more emotional spouse is reaching out for that emotional connectivity. And so connecting remarks might be something like, well, I can understand why you would feel that way. Or thank you for sharing that. Or something else that connects with the feeling behind the words. We don't have to agree to make that connecting remark.
We can say, wow, I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you for sharing your feelings. What do you do in your relationship when one of the parties is exploding in their expression?
That's an uncomfortable position to be in when you never know when the other person might explode on you. Maybe they're not talking and you can't tell that things are ramping up.
Things are building beneath the surface, and maybe they don't feel comfortable letting that spouse be aware of what's going on until it reaches a certain level of intensity and they can't take it anymore, and then they blow up.
So then they have no verbal self-control, perhaps.
Yeah.
And they begin to get into anger and just venting on the other spouse, which can feel like a verbal beating. It can feel harsh and difficult for the listener. And so it's really nice for this person to make the other person aware before they explode. Hey, I'm beginning to feel triggered. I'm beginning to feel escalated. Would you make an adjustment, or I need a timeout?
One of us many times needs a little bit more space to process what's going on and how we feel about what's being said.
One of us is usually an external processor. We're more verbal and expressive. The other person is usually an internal processor. They process on the inside without words. They need space. They need silence to be able to think it through, to know what they even think about this situation.
One of us could be processing what we think as we talk, and the other one talks once they've already decided what they think.
And so if we are the external processor, we want to have periods of silence so that the internal processor can think. Now, the internal processor can say, I need to think about what you just shared. I appreciate you sharing it. I'll come back later once I decide how I feel.
If we need some time to think about it, it's a good thing to say, hey, could you give me some time to think about that? I'll let you know as soon as I find out.